Okay, welcome back. I'm just going to wrap up this image very quickly before I get to talk about the questions, the other questions on the midterm exam of the essay form questions. And so, yeah, I think I covered everything. I think the last point I was trying to make about this work was that it's the way the value organization works is a reflection of its overall intent, which is that since it's a work that's meant to be printed at a page size, something that could have existed in a book, like as a book illustration, or at least something that could be held in your hand, and it's meant to be examined in a different type of way compared to the dramatic effect of a painting that was meant to be hung in a church. And so it has its use of value is different because it's meant to be kind of lingered over, and you're supposed to, um, and the way your eye moves through the composition, right, which is kind of a triangular sort of overall organization, is meant to be kind of slower and more kind of like moment by moment. Okay, so um, let's see. I want to end show, and then I want to get to the questions. Let's see. Okay, so let's start first of all with the two definition questions since we're on this page. So for me, in the definition of in the round, the first thing that you have to do is you have to clarify the difference between in the round and freestanding. Um, those two things are not defined as the same. So um, freestanding would be defined as any work of sculpture that is in, that it does and it was intended to stand on its own. I make that distinction because of like things like the pediment sculpture from the Parthenon, which today stands on its own in the British Museum, but it wasn't intended to stand on its own. It was intended to be part of a pediment relief. So it was meant to be relief sculpture. So needs to be intended to and can stand on its own, right? So that's freestanding. And all in the round sculptures have to be freestanding, but they have to be more than that. To be in the round, they also have to be carved in such a way that they understand that someone would walk all the way around them, and that all those parts are treated and considered. And so that I mean, to give an example, there was the sculpture of the it was a Neo-Sumerian sculpture of King Judea, and there was also an Egyptian example we talked about, where the sculptures are freestanding, but they are completely flat on the back, the completely totally unadorned, because they were never intended to be seen in any way other than straight on or from the side. So to be in the round, you have to be the intention of the sculpture had to be that people would walk around it and appreciate it. And then the distinction I make between the phrase in the round versus fully in the round is the idea that not only are all parts, that the sculptor wants all parts to be finished, because he's thinking, well, someone might walk around it, so I wouldn't want to leave this blank, but that that the whole thing is designed in such a way to draw your eye all the way around the sculpture, to encourage you to walk all the way around it, and that all the way around the sculpture there would be moments of pleasure, that the sculptor doesn't want any one particular view to be like the obvious and only dominant view. Um, that said, I don't think it's really possible to design a sculpture that doesn't have some preferred views over others. It's a matter of proportion, I guess. Okay, so my definition was looking for on radial symmetry. The most important thing would be to get the distinction between radial symmetry and rotational symmetry. I think most of the people who got points off for this wound up actually just defining rotational symmetry. Both rotational symmetry and radial symmetry are symmetries that are designed around a center point and rotate around a center point, where you have some kind of set motif or set of elements that repeat similarly in a round structure around a central point. The difference is in a rotational symmetry that does not have to lead to anything that is also axially symmetrical. That you could have like spiraling patterns that are not axially symmetrical by any axis, but are also rotational. Radial symmetry has to be rotational, but also has to be symmetrical axially symmetrical on at least two axes. Um, so that's the definition of that. Okay, we already talked about these two. All right, I'm just going to read through the value contrasting. We covered that. How the value is created. Yeah, we talked about that. Okay, so I covered all the stuff that was in the question. Okay, on this question, I'm probably just going to skip this one because there's so many options. It's hard for me to give an example. You know, I'd have to like answer every single possible option. But and actually I think on question number 5, most people did pretty well. The biggest problems that people had on question number 5 was not supporting their argument, both logically, you know, and not supporting their argument with supports, like with actually choosing examples of architecture, and make sure when you pick examples of architecture, pick examples that we have discussed in class. That is preferable. And hold on a second while all the dogs bark. And another thing is a lot of people didn't get to this last two part of how picking one type of fundamental purpose and then another. They didn't discuss how the two related and supported each other. So, okay, on question number 6, let's see. So the way I think the logical way to answer this question is to describe this as kind of a continuum, going from sculpture that uses space very little, such as very low relief, like let's say Palette of Namur, right, to high relief. High relief would be defined as similar to low relief, right, in that it is on a flat surface, it has a back to it, and it's not, you know, it's only meant to be seen from the front. But unlike low relief, the forms can partially come out from the form. We have a lot of kind of undercarving, right? That could be like a subtle amount of undercarving, like we see in the Victory Stele of Naram Sin, where the carvers are, the forms, even though they're kind of tiny and they're very much attached to that rock, they're carved a little bit, the backs of them. Or it could be extreme amounts of undercarving, such as like in the pediment sculpture of the Parthenon, where they're so undercarved there literally are separate pieces that are then just attached. Okay, so low relief to high relief, and then start talking about freestanding, which I just did in the previous question, and the difference between freestanding and in the round, which I just did. So you should be able to do all of that, and then if you do front to the in the round and then fully in the round, I think you would cover all of the different ways that sculptures engage space. Although in class we did talk also about the importance of thinking about negative volumes, especially when we're talking about sculptures that were very fully in the round. If you remember, we talked about Bernini's David and how it created very kind of engaging negative volumes, and then made the connection between that and like modern sculpture like Henry Moore sculptures that are also creating negative volumes as a way of engaging the space around it. Okay, and let's see. This question is a little bit hard for me to answer because it really kind of depends on which piece you picked. But I would say about these questions that a lot of people had some points off for basically not really thinking about, not really analyzing the work in terms of composition and page structure and shape grouping, but mostly just kind of talking about other things that they saw. What I was looking for in this question, and I thought it was pretty clearly worded, was very formal analysis, compositional analysis, looking at the works in terms of those issues. Okay, I think that covers the review from the first two tests and the midterm. And so the next video that I'll be making will be a discussion about comparing artworks in preparation for the paper. And that'll probably be a 3-part lecture, like 3 videos.